This is my Canvas course for this class. This is my header. I teach 4th grade. So if you click all about me, it comes to my Meet the Teacher that I used this year. My name is Carissa Totoli. I'm a 4th grade teacher. It's my first year teaching in the county that I'm currently in. I've taught 3 previous grades before. I love all things Disney, the beach, listening to Taylor Swift, and reading. That's a little bit about me. Then I go back to my home page, and our schedule is I have one lesson due per day. So my plan for this was to use this in my classroom, which I do go into school. I do not teach virtual school. I teach at an elementary school here in Orlando, Florida. So my plan was for them to get on their laptops and kind of try it out that way. They'll be doing it in class, but they'll be doing it online. So I would want them to try and complete a lesson per day, and then the quiz, which is the exit ticket, would be Friday, which is kind of like the assessment for this short module. Okay, go back to my home page, and then I have the course objectives. I did decide to do an ELA course for this module. I have you will build your understanding of the structure of craft and poetry. You'll be able to write a summary, well-developed summary with all key elements. You will understand elements of poetry and be able to apply them to poetry readings. So that's what I expect the students to be able to do by the end of this Canvas course module. Then I can go ahead and click here to start this week's assignment. So I start with, I'll go to my module first. So this is my module. I start with an introduction, which is a KWL chart, which is just what do you know, what do you want to know, and what do you want to learn. So I first have this YouTube video, a nice Brain Pop video. My kids love Brain Pop. And then I made this Padlet because I have been using Padlets a lot in my classroom. My students love to post their opinions, their findings about whatever question I have up here. For this specific one, I have write a quick note of 1, what do you already know about poetry? 2, what do you want to know about poetry? And 3, what you learned about poetry from the video. So, and then my kids love to add a little GIF about anything really. But for this one, I added to add a GIF about how they're feeling about starting our poetry unit. I've had mixed responses so far, just from asking them in class, but we will be starting this module actually on Monday. So pressing the next button, I have another video that I would like them to watch. This is just a little poetry rap, that YouTube song that I found on YouTube. So I would just want them to watch them, and then we would do like a think, pair, share afterwards. Then we jump into our first poem of the module. So this one's called The Red Wheelbarrow. We're reading a book called Love That Dog, which is a fully poetry book. It's about a little boy named Jack who kind of thinks at first that poetry is for girls, and then as the story goes on, he actually transforms into someone who loves writing poetry. So it's kind of talking about character growth and how we go from thinking something is one way to kind of maybe liking it ourselves. So we read this first poem, and then we move on to a notice and wonder chart. In the curriculum we use here in Florida, this is a big thing with whatever we read. So we use a notice and wonder chart, which is, okay, I read the passage first, and then what are some things that I notice and what are some things that I wonder. So I made a notice and wonder chart here that the students will have access to. They will put their name, and then they will put 2 notices and 2 wonders that they have here. So this way, it's a collaboration document so that we can see what other students are thinking as well. So then maybe we could do a chat about maybe some similarities and differences that some of the students had. Then to end the first lesson here, we have this Google form where the students actually get to write their own poem modeled off the poem that we read on the first page of this lesson. So that's going to be the first day. Then we're still exploring poetry, so I have another video to kind of launch off this day, which is a TED Talk. Moving on here. This is our book that we're reading, Love That Dog. So we start the actual book this day in class. So this module is kind of odd because some of the poems that we have to read are not directly like sequential in the book. We have to read some poems outside of the book to kind of understand the book, because the main character, Jack, will talk about these poems, such as The Red Wheelbarrow, in his writings every day. So for this one, I'm going to have the students read pages 1 to 5. They each have a, They each have their own copy in school. I would have them kind of read this on their own first, and then they will definitely add to their Notice and Wonder chart in their notebooks that they have already, not the collaboration document. Then a big thing that we're looking at is summary exemplars. So we're learning how to write effective summaries. So, and painting the summary is something we use in my school, which is we're kind of just painting what the summary should look like. So they'll highlight the central idea, yellow, the main characters and setting, red, and other important events in green. And then making sure they use transitional words, they'll highlight those in purple. So we're just identifying the key elements of what a summary should look like. And then moving on from that, I have them kind of looking at the first poem and what we read in Love That Dog, and kind of having them sketch their visuals. Because since vivid imagery is kind of an element of poetry, I want to see what they can gather from this. So I made this a virtual version where they can draw on here as well. A lot of my students love to draw on their computers and their notebooks, anything. So they will be very excited for this part. And then I have another video about just specifically the elements of poetry. And then I move on to another poem. This poem is one of those poems that it's not sequential in the book. It's actually in the back of the book, but Jack, the main character, talks about this poem. So we will read this. They would read this on their own. We would talk about it in class, since they would be doing this course in class together with me. And then we would just record any elements of poetry that we notice in that specific poem. And then lastly, to wrap up this lesson, I made a game called Play Element of Poetry Matchup. So they just click this link and it takes them to a matchup poetry. So it's kind of just, you press start, and I have made a little game to where they have to match up the elements of poetry with the correct definition. And these are also the definitions that they have seen before in the videos and in the curriculum. So that wraps up day 2. Then here we go and read another poem, which is another non-sequential poem that Jack talks about in the book. And then I have them starting to brainstorm of how they can write their own summary of this poem. Then we move on to a chalk talk, which I have made some Google Slides here that they will have access to. So they have to find their group number, and they will go to the correct slide that their group number is on over here, and they will then answer this question as a collaboration group. So I have 6 table groups, so I made 6 groups, and there's 6 questions. So we're just analyzing character development and stuff like that. Then to move on from that is my exit ticket. So this is their last kind of assessment, which it assesses some of their elements of poetry, which one's not an element of poetry. Then we have what the structure of a poem should look like. Some more questions about elements of poetry, what poetry is, how it's written, mainly just to distinguish the difference between what a regular story would look like, what we are used to reading, and what Love That Dog looks like, because it looks very different because each page is a different poem. So it just kind of develops how Jack starts to not, in the beginning he's saying, oh, poetry is for girls, and every day is kind of like a journal prompt. So it's kind of just getting them to get used to this type of writing, which is so different from what we're used to seeing in different texts. So, and then I have just some sentence stems for them to see, okay, this is what imagery would be, and then some other elements of poetry. So there's a total of 10 questions. I gave them only one attempt at this, but we do have a grade level rule that if they do score below a 60%, we will do a reteach and give them another shot at completing this. So this was my first Canvas module. I think it was pretty fun to create. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do so. And that will be all. Did it record? I don't even know if it recorded. Oh, it's recording.